If you know me, you know that I am a huge fan of Final Fantasy VII, so when anything new within the compilation is released, you're guaranteed that I'm more than likely going to check it out. After completing Final Fantasy VII Remake and the Yuffie DLC Intermission, I felt lost wondering when the next installment of the remake will be released. When news came that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth would be released in late 2023, my interest was piqued further when another announcement was made that the PlayStation Portable exclusive Crisis Core would be getting a remaster. Now I must first mention that I was of two minds of this. I am in the camp of players that never really cared all that much for Zack, being that he was just a character that existed as a machination to Cloud's character development within the original Final Fantasy VII. I had also played the original Crisis Core and remember not enjoying it all that much, having put it down not far into the story. But after seeing the trailers for the remaster, I felt like I had to give it another go and see whether I had just given up too early due to it being too different from my beloved Final Fantasy VII, or if it was worthy of being part of the compilation. With that out of the way, let's get into the review. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is a remaster of the original game which first appeared on the PSP across all territories between 2007 and 2008. The game was developed and published by Square-Enix and stayed a PSP exclusive until now. Reunion uses the same engine that Remake was built in and was released for all platforms at the end of 2022. The environments, characters, and battle system were all redeveloped for modern platforms, with a plethora of changes made to make the game an easier experience to get into and enjoy. For the purposes of this review, I played the PlayStation 5 version of the game. Crisis Core begins in much the same way as Final Fantasy VII Remake and the original Final Fantasy VII did, with our protagonist riding atop a train en route to the Sector 1 station in the sprawling Midgar metropolis. However, during the mission, which sees our spiky-haired hero face off against a marauding behemoth in the middle of a plaza, he is interrupted by the appearance of Sephiroth, who leans heavily into an attack stance. Shortly after, we learn that this was all a simulation, and that we are in fact Zack Fair, a third-class soldier operative in the employ of ShinRa. So from the outset, we are playing as the enemy of our Avalanche counterparts from Remake, which made this game an interesting experience to delve into, viewed through the lens of a man that dreams of being a hero amidst the tangled web of a deplorable international corporation on their rise to power. Being set 7 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII, this game tells a more rounded tale, with a more reliable narrator, of how the events prior to Cloud ending up in Midgar unfolded. As a person, Zack is overly optimistic, positive, and generally affable, which made the journey a breeze to get through and caused Zack's low points to hit much harder. As mentioned before, Zack dreams of being a hero, someone who is recognised the world over, as he hails from the remote town of Gongaga, which saw devastation due to a reactor explosion that destroyed a large portion of the town and killed many of its residents. Crisis Core takes us on the journey of Zack's rise through the ranks of soldier, from third class all the way up to first, as he takes part in the war against Wutai, meets Aerith, and ultimately ends up on his mission to Nibelheim, one which those who have played Final Fantasy VII will be very familiar with. I did mention before that I wasn't a fan of Zack, however I found that as the game progressed I became more enamoured of him, to the point where my stance completely changed. If you're unsure of Zack, you definitely need to play this game to figure out what he's all about. Whilst the plot mostly focuses around Zack, Sephiroth is also highlighted quite heavily in the narrative, from his position as a noble and respected first-class soldier through to the cause of his mental degradation, explaining why he's an antagonist in Remake. Additionally, other characters that we have not yet met before round out the story, helping to support the motivations and desires of both Zack and Sephiroth. One thing that I did want to highlight was that initially to me the addition of Angeal and Genesis felt shoehorned in. However, as I played further, I realised that their role helped to establish the initial failure of Shinra's science department with their foray into the Genova project. Whilst we know Sephiroth to be the successful product of experimentation with Genova cells from the original Final Fantasy VII, Angeal and Genesis both represent the initial unsuccessful scientific forays into gene splicing that predated Sephiroth's birth. This gives more believability to Sephiroth as a character, as it always seemed weird to me that he was portrayed as the only experiment into the use of Genova cells and was considered the perfect result, without any previous failures. The looming degradation of Genesis and Angeal, compared to the perfection of Sephiroth as a specimen, gives more scope to his character and merit to his claim that he is the inheritor of the planet's legacy. even though his body is riddled with the cells of an extraterrestrial life form that crashed into the planet 2,000 years ago. Much like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Crisis Core is told in chapters that catalogue the exploits of Zack, with highlights given to noteworthy points in his life, such as his meeting with Aerith or whenever he is promoted. The story isn't end-to-end perfect, with sometimes a bit of time passing between the end of one chapter and the beginning of the next. As such, Zack grows as a person, assuming the mantle of responsibility for those beneath him, whilst also becoming more acutely aware that the organisation that he is working for is probably not one that has his or anyone's best interests at heart. I appreciated seeing him slowly change from the affable golden retriever to being more guarded as the story got to its later points, though I do wish he could have managed to find some time to get a haircut. Breaking up the narrative of the game are missions, of which there are around 300. After reading the report and accepting the mission, you are dumped into a random area where you need to find a target enemy and dispatch it. These are all very repetitive, with a limited number of areas that Zack can go to, each becoming redundant and a bore to explore the more you agree to partake in them. The locations of the missions also don't necessarily thematically match the environments that the briefing mentions. For example, one time it told me Zack would be going to Mediel, and the environment was nothing at all like what I recall that area to be. Within some of the missions there are also some treasures to find. These are not necessary, but being the person that I am, I couldn't complete a mission until I had opened every chest. Whilst exploring, you can encounter battles. However, there is a trick that if you hug the walls of the various areas, the battles won't trigger. Do this at your own risk though, as you may find Zack being underleveled for the narrative, or later missions where enemies can take him out in a couple of hits. Ultimately, whilst I first went in thinking that the missions were similar to the structure of Arc the Lad 3, the more I did, the more I realised that I was possibly being too overzealous about them, and they slowly became more and more irritating to undertake. I ended up doing about 30% of them in total, and then gave up. But by that point, my Zack was so overpowered, there was nothing in the story that could stop him. Even the last boss was a breeze, so it's a wonder that the game ended on the note that it did. Combat feels similar to that of Final Fantasy VII Remake, however there are differences as the original game predates Remake. You don't see enemies on the screen, so the game has random encounters, but they act as transitions into action-based combat. When a woman yells out, "Activating combat mode," Zack draws his blade and the action begins. You can attack, defend, or use an item or equipped materia. The most notable thing though is the digital mind wave, DMW, represented as a mini slot machine in the top left corner of the screen. As the battle continues, the slots will spin for 10 SP every time. If certain combinations of numbers appear, you will gain bonuses such as temporary no MP cost, temporary invincibility, or Zack or his materia may level up. If the images match up, then you may get a limit break, which you can execute by using the triangle button. Zack gains more images for the DMW the more he interacts with and befriends others. The images may sometimes be overwritten by the images of summons. If these images line up, you can then perform a summon by clicking in both analog sticks at the same time. These, along with limit breaks, can be very powerful, so make sure you use them at the correct time. Some of the enemies can use a form of limit break themselves on you, the damage of which is determined by the percentage of a bar that they have remaining after you have wailed on them in an attempt to stop them from performing that action. It's best to save limit breaks for these if you want to survive. Sometimes during battle, if character portraits line up, you may trigger a cutscene. Initially, I found these to be interesting and novel, but as the game wore on, I found them to be tedious and a distraction from whatever I was doing. When they appear, they completely obscure the combat and interrupt the action with jarring juxtaposition to moments in Zack's life that may have not been as frenetic as a battle. I did appreciate that these expanded upon elements of the story which were not made clear, and gave more insight into Zack's relationship with the other characters, but I felt that there could have been a better way to display them. Not only are they a distraction, but sometimes the same scenes appear again and again, due to the random nature of how they are triggered. At least you can skip them. This was definitely one part of the DMW that I did not like. As the story progresses and you complete certain missions, Zack can eventually equip up to 3 pieces of equipment and 6 materia. I enjoyed the equipment was mostly items that were found in the original Final Fantasy VII, diegetically linking the two games together. Materia can level up and be mastered, however does not impart new materia like the original game. Don't worry though, because you will find plenty of materia in chests within the missions. To level up materia, you need to either get a specific numeric combination on the DMW, or you need to be lucky enough to summon Moogle, who will level up all of Zack's equipped materia in a cute little sequence that always made me smile every time I saw it. Zack's materia is completely customizable through fusion, where you can meld two materia together to make a better one. With the use of items in the mix, almost alchemically, you can create materia that grants specific bonuses such as better HP and MP ratios, as well as increases to Zack's base statistics. It is recommended that you do this, as some of the later missions have enemies that hit super hard or have instant death abilities, which can become rather bothersome rather quickly. Being that the game is made in Unreal Engine 4, the visuals are absolutely stunning, from the green infused hues of Midgar City through to the ethereal glimmer of coral growing in an ocean cave. If I had one complaint, it would be that Zack's character model doesn't interact with water puddles in a natural way, which drew me a little bit out of the experience. Other than that, everything else was amazing. I enjoyed seeing the monster designs of enemies that had appeared in the original Final Fantasy VII, but we had not yet seen in Remake, and the lighting and effects of magic and abilities in battle always astounded me with the way that they popped and the weight in which they hit the enemy, or Zack. The music was composed by Takehiro Ishimoto with a general country feel to them, highlighting Zack's origin. I didn't like this back in the day, but I can appreciate it now and understand why it was done like this. It also helps that stylistically Cloud's theme from Remake, Hollow, also has a country theme, comparing the two Mako-infused heroes. Rounding out the soundtrack are industrial themes as well as some remixes from Final Fantasy VII. My favourite track would be The Shrouded Village, which plays during the Nibelheim section of the game. Not only does the track itself have heavy nostalgia for me from when I played the original game as a kid, but it also tells a tale of how Shinra has stepped all over the various other settlements of the world with the proliferation of Mako reactors and their energy, which, whilst preaching benefit to these communities, has left many wanting, with the surrounding environments slowly beginning to rot and decay. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is a game that you must play if you want insight into who Zack is, as well as why Sephiroth is the way he is. Whilst the pacing of the narrative may leave a lot to be desired, especially if you spend a lot of time doing the side missions, there are enough story threads present to keep even the most dedicated Final Fantasy VII fan entertained. Whilst the missions themselves often allude to Zack going to places which don't at all match the environments that we know and love, the story missions that do take you to some of these locations are worth pushing forward for. If you have not played Crisis Core, I feel that you are doing yourself a great disservice. Play it before Rebirth comes out, as with the way that that game is going, if you don't play this one first, you may be very confused by Cloud's storytelling. By the way, what are some of your favourite moments from this game? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venoir with a review of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion for the PlayStation 5. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe for more great JRPG content. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch this video, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye for now.